Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and human rights. All right, welcome back to Policy and Rights here in Depictions Media Radio. I am your host, Michael Clogs. So we're going to hear from the Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Liberal government as she speaks about what is going on in the Middle East, Israel and Iran, Israel and Gaza, and other things. She's making statements, and she is going to talk with people in the hopes of bringing about ceasefires and calmer heads in the wake of a drone strike. Along with this, the WHO reported about the hospital in Gaza that is just simply left in ruins. They're standing in the rubble as they're reporting about it. There were patients who have been transferred to other hospitals, and here's the thing. According to UN rules and on war, combat, things like that civilian sites such as hospitals are supposed to be considered to be safe havens. And we're seeing more and more that isn't the truth. We're seeing that the Hamas may have been using hospitals to shield their operations, knowing that military operations cannot reach them from within the hospital. We're seeing that under the same guise that Israel has gone ahead and destroyed hospitals and other civilian sites that should have been safe havens. There's a lot going on with the Middle East, a lot that has to be accounted for before a real peace could be found. And we have to keep that in mind as we listen to Melanie Joly as she's speaking about Canada's stance on what is actually happening in the Middle East at this point. So why don't we listen to what it is that she said in her statement to the press from Ottawa.
Okay, so first and foremost, Canada unequivocally condemns the attacks by Iran against Israel over the weekend. This is unprecedented. We stand with the people of Israel. And of course, this attack only served to destabilize the region and further escalation. And this is completely unacceptable. I've been in contact over the weekend with my Israeli counterparts, with many actors in the region, having many conversations. Canada is pushing diplomatically to stop further escalation. And at the same time, we are still calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. It is important that hostages be released, and it is important also that aid be sent to Palestinians in Gaza. I'm heading tonight to Italy for the G7 foreign ministers meetings. We'll have many conversations about this. We'll be indeed talking about the Middle East, putting much more further sanctions against Iran and its regime, and also engaging with the Global South as we are looking forward to bring much more peace to the world. Donc, juste en français, le Canada condamne sans équivoque les attaques de l'Iran contre Israël au cours du week-end. C'était des attaques sans précédent. Le Canada est aux côtés des Israéliens dans ces moments difficiles. Ces attaques avaient pour but de déstabiliser la région et de poursuivre l'escalade. Et en ce sens-là, elles sont complètement inacceptables. J'ai été en contact avec mon homologue israélien au cours du week-end. J'ai été en contact avec aussi plusieurs acteurs de la région. Et le Canada continue de pousser pour stopper l'escalade potentielle dans la région. Et bien entendu, nous en appelons encore et toujours à un cessez-le-feu à Gaza. Les otages doivent être libérés et plus d'aide humanitaire doit être acheminée à Gaza. Et finalement, j'irai ce soir en Italie où le G7 des ministres des Affaires étrangères aura lieu. J'aurai l'occasion de rencontrer plusieurs de mes homologues du G7, plusieurs de mes homologues également du Sud. Et nous allons continuer à travailler ensemble sur la question du Moyen-Orient, imposer des sanctions fortes contre l'Iran et également travailler pour ramener plus de paix dans la région, mais aussi à travers le monde.
Vous parlez d'imposer des sanctions fortes.
Okay, I'll just start with French and then I'll go to English. Okay?
Quel genre de sanctions fortes est-ce que vous envisagez imposer? Puis par ailleurs, il va y avoir une motion ici pour désigner les gardiens de la révolution islamique comme étant une entité terroriste. Vous allez voter quoi? Vous aviez déjà voté pour ça. Est-ce qu'il est temps d'agir enfin là-dessus?
Bien, on sait déjà que l'Iran propage sa terreur un peu partout au sein de son propre pays, mais aussi à travers la région. Alors, c'est très, très important qu'on continue à mettre de la pression parce qu'on sait que l'Iran n'est pas intéressé par la paix. Nous avons déjà travaillé avec plusieurs pays du G7. Nous allons continuer à le faire. Et le ministre de la Sécurité publique aussi travaille sur la question des gardes de IRGC, là, en français. Là.
Des sanctions comme ça, parce que c'est pas la première fois là, qu'on en parle. Est-ce que c'est réaliste dans le concret?
Mon collègue de la Sécurité publique travaille sur cette question-là. Entre-temps, nous avons déjà imposé des sanctions au niveau d'Affaires mondiales sur les dirigeants les plus importants et sur tous ceux et celles qui ont été impliqués dans plusieurs actes de terreur par les gardes de la révolution islamique. Yes, another quote in French and then I'll go in English.
Au niveau diplomatique, il y a d'autres de nos alliés qui ont déjà déclaré la garde révolutionnaire iranienne comme étant une organisation terroriste. Au niveau diplomatique, qu'est-ce qui empêche le Canada de le faire?
Les États-Unis qui l'ont fait.
Mais c'est des alliés.
Les États-Unis l'ont fait, on n'en prend pas de note.
Mais si je peux
Maintenant,
vous poser la question, qu'est-ce qui
au sein de
empêche le
plusieurs
Canada de faire la même chose en ce moment?
Comme je vous dis, le ministre de la Sécurité publique étudie la question. Entre-temps, nous savons que l'Iran propage sa terreur. C'est pour ça que nous, au niveau d'Affaires mondiales, nous avons déjà listé plusieurs personnes et entités et nous les avons sanctionnées. Je pense qu'on doit aller encore plus loin, on doit mettre la pression maximale parce que ce qui s'est passé au cours du week-end, que ce soit la saisie d'un bateau israélien ou bien entendu plus de 300 missiles qui ont attaqué Israël, complètement inacceptable et donc bien entendu le Canada va réagir. En même temps, on en appelle à la déescalade. On doit s'assurer que le conflit ne s'étende pas dans la région. Alors, c'est pourquoi nous prenons des décisions après mûre réflexion et avec beaucoup d'attention sur aussi quels autres pays réagissent et comment on réagit.
English Minister, will you be designating the IRGC as a terrorist organization?
Thank you. So, first and foremost, we know that Iran is spreading its terror within its own country and also across the region and the world. And that is why we've sanctioned very clearly key individuals and will continue to put maximum pressure against the Iranian regime, which completely disregards peace. The Minister of Public Safety is actively working on options, and it is important that we also coordinate with our key allies. Meanwhile, that it is clear that Canada is pushing for de-escalation in the region, and that is a coordinated message that we're all sending to G7 countries.
Just to clarify, Minister, when is one of the options on the table, can be very clear for Canadians, is one of the options on the table designating the IRGC as a terrorist organization? Is that an active option you're considering?
The Prime Minister already answered that question back in January, and he already said that we were actively working on it. That being said, as of now, under my purview, what we can do is quickly designate key individuals that are part of these activities that are criminal activities against Israelis and also against our interests, and that is why, on my side, I'll be working on this issue.
When you say de-escalate, are you taking the position, is Canada taking the position that Israel should not respond to this attack by Iran?
We think that it's important that Israel be able to protect itself. It has done so over the weekend, and we are clearly pushing for de-escalation, and we need to make sure that the conflict doesn't extend to the region. So that is why I've been clear to my counterpart in please take the win and make sure that we can work together to bring back peace in the region.
Pressure, what does it look like you're not going to designate it as a terrorist organization?
Sorry, can you start again, Rafi?
Sure. What does maximum pressure look like if you're not going to take the step to designate it as a terrorist organization? What will you do instead?
I've said that we are actively working on this. The Prime Minister answered the question back in January, and the Minister of Public Safety is on this issue. What I can do under my own purview, in my own responsibility, under my own legislation, is designating people and making sure that they're sanctioned. And that's what I'm working on, because we've already sanctioned dozens of key RGC officials. We need to go further, and that's why I'll be working with G7 countries as I'm heading to Italy later today. Oui, je vais prendre la dernière français.
Parce que vous dites il y a des risques d'escalade. Concrètement, qu'est-ce qu'Israël devrait faire? Concrètement.
Moi, ce que je viens de dire en anglais, c'est que c'est important qu'Israël ce que je viens de dire en anglais. Israël a le droit de se protéger, bien entendu, et nous allons toujours soutenir Israël dans son droit de se protéger. En même temps, on veut s'assurer qu'il n'y ait pas d'escalade. Et c'est pourquoi j'ai parlé, à mon collègue en lui disant « prends le gain ». En anglais, je dirais « take the win ». Parce qu'en effet, ce qu'Israël a fait au cours du week-end a été une démonstration de sa capacité extraordinaire de se protéger. Et on peut être très fiers du travail que les Israéliens ont fait au cours du week-end, parce qu'ils ont été victimes d'une attaque sans précédent par l'Iran, plus de 300 missiles. Et donc, c'est pourquoi, dans la situation actuelle, on doit continuer encore et toujours de travailler pour que la guerre ne s'étende pas à la région, et c'est exactement les conversations que je vais avoir au cours des prochains jours. Merci beaucoup.
You're not really in your bailiwick, but I wanted to ask you your thoughts on declaring the Revolutionary Guard a terrorist organization.
Well, certainly, I have one of the largest Iranian-Canadian populations in my riding in the country, and I speak with the community about it all the time. I would say we put into place a whole range of sanctions, and we are continuing to look at all other ways to actually continue to tighten the screws on the government of Iran. That includes the issue around listing of the IRGC. It is not simple under Canadian law, and of course we want to ensure that we are not impacting conscripts to the IRGC, but it certainly remains a live conversation.
When you talk to your constituents about it, what are they telling you?
They are telling me that they have appreciated the acts that the government put a range of different restrictions on the government of Iran, and they are looking for us to continue the efforts to tighten the screws on the government of Iran and to ensure that we are enforcing some of the regulations around people who shouldn't be in this country to not be in this country.
Do you think that the IRGC is a terrorist organization? Do you think it should be labeled as such?
Well, I think, it's recognized around the world that the government of Iran sponsors terrorism, and the IRGC is involved in that in a direct way. So, again, there are complexities under Canadian law that Mr. Poilievre likes to ignore, but we certainly are looking for any and all ways to tighten the screws on the government of Iran and on the IRGC. We are continuing to look at the issue of listing within the Canadian law.
Je vais juste poser une question en français, la même question en français. Votre position sur les IRGC et comme un groupe terroriste?
L'IRGC, c'est une organisation qui, comment est-ce qu'on dit, qui contribuait au terrorisme dans le monde, avec Hamas, avec Hezbollah, avec beaucoup de groupes de terroristes. Et nous voulons mettre en place beaucoup de pression sur le gouvernement d'Iran, et même ça inclut le IRGC. Et nous présentement, nous avons les conversations de comment on peut plus. Nous avons mis en place beaucoup de mesures pour adresser les enjeux, mais nous avons maintenant les conversations. Qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire pour augmenter la pression sur le gouvernement d'Iran?
Pourquoi pas nommer ce groupe comme un groupe terroriste?
Well, c'est pas très simple sur les lois du Canada. C'est différent que les lois des États-Unis, par exemple. Et nous voulons assurer que quand nous prenons les mesures, c'est dans les lois du Canada. Mais bien sûr, maintenant, nous considérons beaucoup des idées, inclus comment on peut faire ça, qui est en accord avec les lois du Canada.
Et des gens dans votre riding, qu'est-ce qu'ils disent concernant ce groupe?
Mon circonscription a peut-être le plus nombreux membres des communautés canadiennes iraniennes. Et bien sûr, j'ai beaucoup de conversations sur ces enjeux. Il veut assurer qu'ils sont saufs au Canada. Il n'y a pas les gens qui sont en accord avec le gouvernement d'Iran, qui restent ici, bien sûr. Et nous voulons que nous appliquions la pression contre le gouvernement d'Iran et augmente cette pression. Mais c'est quelque chose que nous devons faire, bien sûr. Le gouvernement d'Iran, c'est un caractère très, très mauvais dans le monde entier.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Here's a couple of sound bites from the WHO and the UN as you're going to tour the Al-Shifta hospital that was left in ruins after fighting, and the hospital was built and supplied by efforts by the WHO, and they are touring it, showing the emergency room, neonatal care units, and nurseries, and talking about the destruction ahead there. In the clip after that, we're going to hear as doctors are talking about the medications that are needed. We'll hear one talk about anesthesia, and we're also going to hear some statements from grateful patients as they're being transferred to other hospitals for better care and for needed treatment. So the part of the clips will be actually in the native Palestinian Arabic and not in English, so we'll just have to bear with that. So why don't we listen to those two clips right now, and then we'll come back from the UN floor as we hear a representative from the AEA as they're making statements to the press.
This is what used to be the emergency department, and as you can see, it's totally destroyed. Everything is burned, and there's a smell of sewage and of the rotten bodies around. What you also see here in the yard of the hospital are the graves of people who have died. Some of them have been buried, some of them are not yet even buried. In many other places you can see the bodies that are rotting under the Gazan sun. Behind me is the remains of the neonatal intensive care unit and the nursery.
In the last 3 years, WHO has invested more than 5 million USD to make sure that patients would be getting proper care. Now, these places that used to save lives and limbs, it's all torn down to pieces.
In the chapel of Al-Ahli Hospital, which also served as an inpatient ward. The majority of patients on trauma cases, there's still a shortage of all kinds of medication, including anesthesia, which we need to get in as quickly as possible.
بكفي حرب وبكفي صواب بكفي شهداء بكفي حزن بكفي دمار.
We're taking with us 3 critical patients, but we could have taken with us maybe 50 patients or 100 patients actually who deserve better treatment and care.
مبسوطة إنها بنتي تطلع يعني وتحقق الأمل اللي كنت أنا أعاني منه إنها تطلع تتعالج، وإن شاء الله يا رب هيك يكون يعني أمل عند حده وترجع يعني وتصير زي ما كانت وأحسن يا رب.
يعني اليوم بدت السعادة من هذا المكان إنه أنا في إلي رعاية خاصة واهتمام إلي كمصاب من ذوي الاحتياجات الخاصة وإصابة بالغة وخطيرة.
Okay, so the representative for the International Atomic Energy Agency, or the AEA, Mr. Rafael Grossi, he's going to make some statements about threats to international peace and security following his addressing the Security Council. Atomic energy and security, we have seen, at least in the Ukraine and Russia, that nuclear power plants have been targeted, and the results of targeting such a site can be absolutely disastrous for many generations. We've seen in the past, we've seen accidents such as Chernobyl that have happened where we're decades later and the land still is not usable. So imagine if a nuclear power plant is specifically targeted by a drone or a missile, and the destruction to communities, surrounding communities, and the people around them, what that could actually mean. So with that, why don't we listen to what Mr. Grossi, the director of the International Atomic Energy Agency, has to say about global security and international peace with nuclear and atomic energy.
When making statements, as far as the agency is concerned, I don't refer to national statements, but as far as the agency who is inspecting there is concerned, we don't have any information or indication that there is a nuclear weapon program in Iran. At the same time, while we say this, which we need to say, we are telling our Iranian counterparts that this important accumulation of nuclear material at levels that are very, very close, technically identical almost, to weapon grade level, of course, is not irrelevant and raises questions in the international community. This is why we are always urging, asking, requiring them to cooperate with us in full. I can say that I am reestablishing contacts with the Iranian government in order, for me personally, of course, our inspectors continue to do their work, as I was just responding to your colleague here. It's not that we are not there, but we are not there at the level that we consider we should be. So I hope in the next few weeks to return to Tehran and to try to put the situation back on track.
With your traveling to Iran,
we are talking about that. Yes.
Hi, Mr. Grossi.
Hello.
Margaret Bashir, Voice of
How are you?
America. I will switch it back to Ukraine now.
Please.
On Zaporizhzhia, sorry, I just wrote so many notes here for you.
Yeah.
Just one clarification
Yes.
first, if I could. You talked about two external lines of power.
Yeah.
That only has two
Yeah.
external lines of power. For those of us who are not nuclear scientists, could you tell us how many lines of external power a facility like Zaporizhzhia
It
should
used to have 10. It used to have 10. So now, as you can see, with only two, one 750 kilowatt and the other 330, with only two lines and frequent interruptions, including 9 blackouts, this safety situation of the plant is very serious because you need this external power supply in order to ensure the cooling function of the reactors, which even at the current status, which is in the jargon we call it shutdown, means that they are working almost at a very, very minimal level or completely stopped. The temperatures are lower, but you have a lot of nuclear material there, and of course, which is still in need of continuous cooling. So if you lose the power that allows the cooling systems to work, then, as it happened several times, then you have to recourse, as you would in a private house, you need to use emergency generators, which are, the last line of defense, I would say. So one never wants to be with the last emergency measure, the last emergency tool that you have in your toolbox to avoid a meltdown. So this is why the issue of the power lines is something I am constantly repeating.
And then on the five principles that you have been going over, you seem to be pretty clear, excuse me, in the council on 4 of them, but you didn't really you didn't seem to say whether weapons or heavy equipment are being stored in
There is
or
no
around the
heavy
facility.
weaponry there.
There's no heavy weapon.
No, I have to say it, because when we established these 5 concrete principles, we did it not top of my head. It was the result of almost a year-long effort where we consulted with Ukraine, with Russia, on what would be the essential elements that should not happen, should not take place. And we even, if you look at them, we gave some examples. Multiple rocket launchers, tanks, heavy artillery, and ammunition. So at the same time, there is security presence. There are armored vehicles and some security presence at the plant, which has been publicized quite openly and also in my own reports. But when it comes to heavy weaponry at the plant, the vicinity is something else. But at the plant, within the plant, our experts so far have not seen that. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Grossi. Stefano Vaccara, La Voce di New York Ital Press. You've been here several times. I remember a year ago, and you were kind of worried, very worried about the situation. So now, after 2 years of Russian invasion, comparing with the situation no? How worried are you, more or less? And today we saw again, the Russian ambassador, the Ukrainian ambassador, pointing finger to each other. Basically, everyone is saying that somebody else fought all the time. Indeed. Now, you, in your report, would you clarify, if you had to give a yellow card, which one gets the first yellow card, Russia or Ukraine?
Well, what you raise is a very important point, and is a point that everybody is talking about, this issue of attribution. Point finger, say it's this country or that country. We are not commentators. We are not political speculators or scholars or analysts. We are an international agency of inspectors. And in order to say something like that, we must have proof, indisputable evidence that an attack or remnants of ammunition or any other weapon is coming from a certain place. And in this case, it is simply impossible. Let me remind you that these attacks have been performed with a multitude of drones. First of all, the drone, as we all know, by their own technical functioning, has a diverse trajectory. It hovers, it circles, it can go into, remember this plant is at the front line, it can go to the Russian occupied territory, it can come from different places. It could be manned from one side and belong to another side. So for us, it would be impossible. At the same time, because we have been looking at these drones, these are 4 rudder drones which can be obtained almost anywhere. So the technical, I would say, forensic is not there to allow me to say it is indisputably something coming from here or there. This is why we keep the information as accurate as we can, and we do not sway into speculating, okay? So this is what we do. You were saying how concerned we are. We are very concerned. This is why at times I have said at the moment, we don't see a problem, but this is very precarious. And some were saying, well, but nothing is happening. You see what happened. This is a combat zone. In a combat zone, any day, something very, very serious can happen. So I have the red card, I have the yellow card, I have them ready in my hands. The most important thing is that they see that the referee is there on the pitch.
Thank you, Mr. Grossi. Alan Bucati from news agency RIA Novosti. Do you mean that you won't be able anytime soon to define the perpetrator in terms of Zaporozhye nuclear power plant?
Well, that depends on the circumstance. That depends on the circumstance. The IAEA would not be in the business of hiding anything. You know, this is very important. When we see something, if we have evidence of something, we do not have a problem in reporting, but we have to be extremely measured in what we do. We know that in a war, there are certain operations. There are sometimes operations leading the observer to believe that something is happening in a certain sense while it is happening in a different sense, intelligence operations and many other things. And the voice of the IAEA is very important. The credibility of the IAEA, which applies to this, applies to Iran, applies to Korea, applies to the Middle East, applies to everything, must be preserved. I am the guardian of this institution, and I have to measure the words so that when we put something on the public domain, it's something that is concrete and proven.
In case of any nuclear
well, it would
incident
depend on the magnitude of the accident. It would depend. If there is a minor leak, then it would be restricted to the perimeter. If it's something bigger, it could be regional. The thing is, and this is what we have been saying, you don't want to try. You don't want to run the risk of something that could have a very widespread effect that would affect, and let us be reminded that radiation would not respect borders or control territories. It would have a very wide, big impact. Yes, sir, please.
Denis Akishev, TASS News Agency. Did you negotiate with either side mechanism of inspection and giving inspecting accountability mechanism? So how to
yeah, I understand your question, accountability. No, I mean, the ISAM's mission and the 5 concrete principles that I established here a year ago indicate what should not be happening and says that we are going to be monitoring that. We are not a tribunal, if you want, that would be attributing, punishments or anything of the sort. We are there informing, providing a technical assessment. Sir, yes.
Thank you very much for taking questions, Mr. Grossi. Gabriel Elizondo from Al Jazeera English. Just
Yes.
a quick clarification on your comment, one of your comments to the council. You said just in the last couple days under the IAEA's suggestion that all 6 of the reactors are now in cold shutdown.
Shutdown.
Can you explain the significance? I know 5 were in cold shutdown. Now that all 6 are, what is the significance of that, and why was the why did you recommend that?
Yeah, indeed. This is, as I was partially explaining to one of your colleagues now, this means that the reactors are operating at an extremely low level. They are not producing any energy or electricity or power, which means that the temperature of the core is much, much lower. So in case, if there was an attack or something that would compromise the physical integrity, then the consequences would be easier to mitigate. It doesn't mean that there wouldn't be consequences. It would be an easier crisis to be mitigated. The agency had been recommending, advising the management of the plant to put this unit at cold shutdown like all the others. But this is an evolving situation. Let's see how it continues.
Just one very quick follow-up,
Please.
sir. I'm sorry. And are you and your team getting all of the access that you need and demand from the Russian officials on site, or not?
I would say by and large, yes, but it's also true, and I have said it in some of my reports, that on occasion we haven't been given the access. What happens on some occasions, and we do not have an element to assess whether this is justified or not, we have to accept what we are told. Sometimes we are told that our teams cannot access a certain area. You know, the plant is a very huge site, that they cannot access this site because there's an impending attack or something of the sort. And when this happens, of course, my responsibility for my staff is that we should follow those instructions. But we are asking constantly and saying, like I said again today, that for us to be giving an accurate impression of what is happening, we must have access to the entire site. Yeah.
Follow-up on Iran, please. What are you hoping to accomplish by traveling to Iran? You say you're going to travel in the next 2 weeks.
Well, what I hope to accomplish is to get or to put the situation to help put it in a higher level of cooperation, if I can put it like this. We are getting access, which in my opinion could be much better. Let me remind you that, again, a bit more than a year ago, I went to Tehran and I signed a joint declaration with the Iranian government indicating a number of actions that we would be taking together with Iran beyond, in addition to what we are already doing. We started that process, and that process was interrupted. And I have been insisting, and I have been saying, we need to go back to that understanding we had in March 2023. So I hope one of the issues that I should be discussing with the Iranian government, if I return soon, is how to go back to that path of cooperation.
And will you be going to Ukraine anytime soon?
Yes, yes. We need to Ukraine and to Russia, as I have been doing since the beginning. I will. Another point I stress is that we must keep these channels of communication open. One of the precious things about this mission by the IAEA is that we are talking to both. We keep both engaged, and we try to make the most of the situation in spite of the difficult circumstances.
Do you have a date on the calendar?
Not yet, but it will be coming soon. I thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to see you, and I will be keeping you informed of any news. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye.
In other updates from CNN, how about this one? NASA is rethinking a plan to return to Mars to retrieve samples. The Perseverance rover has been gathering specimens since 2021, and to help better understand life, if there ever existed on the red planet. And now the space agency is soliciting proposals for sample return mission with less complexity, costs, and just a chance to learn from what the red planet has to tell us. Okay, on a more serious note, the Trump trial. Former President Donald Trump is set to return to a New York City courtroom for a second day of jury selection continues in his criminal hush money trial. A total of 96 New Yorkers were brought in on Monday as prospective jurors. 50 were immediately dismissed when they said they couldn't be fair and impartial. With swift dismissal of prospective jury poll underscores the difficulty in finding a jury when a defendant is the former president who elicits such strong feelings on both sides of the aisle. Moving on. Funding flight. Speaker Mike Johnson Monday and the House take up several bills this week to provide aid for Israel and Ukraine, heeding demands far from the right to keep the issues separate as the threat of a vote to oust him from the speaker looms. In the wake of Iran's unprecedented retaliatory strikes on Israel, Democrats have called on Johnson to bring up a Senate-passed foreign aid package that includes aid to Israel and Ukraine, but hardline conservatives urge that the Louisiana Republican against attaching Ukraine funding to any Israel package aid. And let's move on to the Baltimore Bridge. Federal authorities have launched a criminal investigation into last month's ship crash that destroyed Baltimore's Francis Scott Key Bridge and killed 6 people, according to a U.S. official familiar with the matter. The bridge collapsed on March 16th after a massive cargo ship lost power, veered off course, and struck the bridge. The ship owner and manager have since filed a court document in an attempt to limit their financial liability. The FBI and the U.S. Coast Guard are leading probes to determine whether the crew failed to report an earlier issue with the ship that delayed its departure. The officials said also Monday authorities confirmed the body of a fourth victim had been recovered from the collapse. Okay, and moving on. Rust sentencing. Hannah Gutierrez Reed, the armor of the film Rust, was sentenced to 18 months in prison. Monday, the maximum possible punishment. She was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter last month for the 2021 on-set fatal shooting of cinematographer Halyna Hutchins. The verdict comes 2 years after Hutchins was killed by a live round of munitions fired from a prop gun held by Alec Baldwin. And moving on to Tesla. Tesla is looking to cut 10% of its global staff of 140,000. The CEO, Musk, wrote in an email to Tesla employees. Musk attributed the planned job cut to the need to cut cost reductions and increase productivity, according to reports. This after Tesla recently announced a year-over-year decline in sales in the first 3 months of this year. It's such a drop since the height of the pandemic amid softer demand for electric car sector. Other automakers, including General Motors, Ford, have also pulled back on their electric vehicle production. So, updates from CNN would be April 16th, 2024. So, final thoughts, and I want to thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio here on final thoughts, though. We do need to find peaceful solutions to things. We need to stop the attacks. We need to slow down and think about what we're doing and the lives that are going to be lost. We need to think of all of our fellow human beings as equal fellow human beings, and not just as human animals or something that is less than what we are. Stop pointing at, those people, and welcome our brothers, as we are all part of the human race. Find that subscribe button wherever it may be so you can get continued updates from us. This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.